Hours and hours of boredom interrupted by moments of sheer terror. Has anyone in this room ever heard that before? Yeah, that's what I thought. 1972, about 2 o'clock in the morning, at 35,000 feet, flying the third mission in 4 days. And as you mentioned, Bachmai Airfield was our target. And at about a minute before bombs away, my procedure was to take one last look around for SAMs that looked like a direct threat to the airplane, because there were lots of SAMs flying around every night. And the last place I looked was over the nose of the airplane. And there was one as big as this building, it looked like to me. And I remember thinking, get above us before you detonate. And the next thing I know, the airplane's up in about a 30-degree bank. All the windscreens are totally shattered, but intact. And about half of the red lights in the cockpit are on. And so I leveled the wings, and I was pleasantly surprised that I was able to level the wings, but I still had flight control. And then I started checking the red lights, and in the B-52D model, right about here on the panel, are the lights for 10 hydraulic packs. D model had 10 hydraulic packs, and about half of those red lights were on. So then I go from there, and I say, okay, I've lost about half the hydraulics. I look in front of me, and number 3 and 4 engine fire lights are on. So I look out the window, and yeah, number 3 and 4 engine fire are on fire. So I shut 3 and 4 down, I pull the fire T-handles on 3 and 4, look in front of my co-pilot, and I see this big red master fire light, and think, And about that time, the second SAM hits the airplane. Now, let me just back up in time a little bit, because I definitely want to talk about from 1967 until 1970, when I was at Grissom Air Force Base flying my all-time favorite airplane, a B-58 Hustler. And let me tell you folks, that plane was mislabeled. It was not a B-58, it was an F-58. It was just a big fighter. Up until that time, my favorite airplane had been the F-86, and that was a great airplane too. But once I got into Hustler, that was the airplane. But one of the things I really liked about the 86, that was without a doubt the best crew I ever had. I never had a problem with that crew. God, they were some sharp. I mean, they were good. Anyway, unfortunately, they made a decision in late 1969 to put the B-58s in the boneyard. So almost all of us, I think there were a couple exceptions, but almost all of us were on our way to Vietnam, because as long as we were in the 58 program, we didn't have to go to Vietnam. So then all of us went. And I drew a real short straw and got a trash hauler, like you say, C-130s. Talk about change in airplane. I'm coming out of an airplane that comes down final at 200 knots at an AOA of 13 degrees. And now I'm in a Herky-Bird that's coming down final at 120 knots. I didn't think we were ever going to get to the end of the run. The first time at 130, I thought, we're never going to get there. We're going to run out of fuel or something. They are so slow. So anyway, the Herky-Bird finished that tour in Vietnam in July of '71, as you pointed out, and then to Carswell Air Force Base for the first time, and was home from July of '71 until April of '72, when here I go back over to Southeast Asia. Not in country this time, but at Guam. And just a typical mission prior to Linebacker II for the Buffs was 3-ship cells. We always flew in 3-ship cells, and there was a 3-shipper launching every hour from Guam or Lutapao, Thailand. And what I want to just touch on for a minute is the briefing. We used to brief. We would meet in the base theater, that's where to hold the briefing. 3 crews, 6 people on a crew, 18 people in a theater. And the briefing officer's biggest problem was getting those 18 people to shut up long enough that they could give the briefing, because nobody cared. You heard the same thing every time you went. And many times we told them, said, tell us what stub our airplane's on, when do we start engines, and what's takeoff time. That never happened. Okay, now, let's go to the 18th of December, 1972. And I was at Utapao, not Guam, when I got back, and I was flying out of Utapao. But anyway, at the briefing, that's what I want to share with you. The big difference between the normal briefings when we were prior to Linebacker II and the briefing the first night of Linebacker II. And now there are a hell of a lot more than 18 people in this room, because we're not flying in 3-ship cells anymore. We're flying a wave of B-52s. And a wave of B-52s was a number of cells. And these cells were compressed into one big formation, think World War II. And the briefing went like this. That briefing officer could have briefed in a whisper without one of these, and I guarantee you everyone in that room would have heard every word. And it reminded me of that old World War II movie, which I'm sure most of you have seen, 12 O'Clock High, when Gregory Peck pulls that curtain back off that wall map, and they see they're going against a heavily defended target in Germany. And the mood that was depicted in that movie was what I was kind of seeing in that room. And then the other thing that I remember very clearly was the thought, I looked around the room, just like I am now, and I thought, there is really a good chance that some of us in this room are going to die in the next 3 hours. And unfortunately, I was right. We lost 2 airplanes that night. And I remember as I was leaving the briefing room to go to the airplane, it just so happened we were leading the second wave. We were taking off about midnight. And the first wave had taken off just at dark, and they were recovering. And I remember running into a couple of guys in the hallway. And they never said anything, and I didn't say anything. And I just knew from looking at them, this is going to be a real exciting mission, which it was. Okay, so, do you remember where we were at? We're at 35,000 feet, all the windscreens are shattered, airplanes in bank. Second SAM hits the airplane. Now this one blew a hole in the pressurized compartment, which really wasn't a real big problem because our pressurization is set on combat setting, so there isn't that much of a differential when we went to 35,000 feet. We're all on oxygen, obviously. But what I remember most about it was the noise level. I mean, it was so loud in that airplane when we lost our pressurization. And the other thing that happened with that second SAM was, in a way, well, there was a good thing and a bad thing that happened with that second SAM hitting the airplane. The good thing was, all my red lights went out. Bad thing was, all of my lights went out. And so here we are, folks. One of those moments, and it always happens. You know, you've got how many seconds to make a life and death decision, and I just happened to find myself in that situation because I was not excited about stepping out of that airplane, and we were probably just only maybe 20 clicks southeast of Hanoi at this time. And this is the 4th night we've been bombing their capital. So I wasn't really excited about stepping out of that airplane. But there were a couple things. I had looked out to check on number 3 and 4 engine fires and saw that now the wing is on fire. And I'm thinking, this is not good, because if that wing snaps, in the B-52D model, the ejection seats were very reliable in a 1G configuration. They were not so reliable in a high G load. So I thought, if I wait too long to bail them out and that wing snaps, probably most of us won't get out. But on the other hand, and what I really wanted to do was keep that airplane airborne for another 6 or 7 minutes and make it to the Gulf of Tonkin, because we owned the Gulf, and so there we'd be picked up by friendlies. But I thought, I don't think it's going to make it. I don't think we'll make it So I decided to bail him out. Okay, now let's jump to the Hanoi Hilton. And the first week, I'm in solitary confinement. And that was tough for me, and I just had the greatest admiration for those guys, the real POWs that were in isolation. They were in solitary for years. I mean, I don't know how they ever dealt with it, because for me, that was difficult. And I think part of it was, even back in the olden days, in 1970s, we're action-oriented. I mean, we're checking the time, what we got scheduled, what's going on. You take somebody from that environment all their life, you put them in a little cell where all you got is a honey bucket and a straw mat, and you have no input from the outside world. You have no TV, you have no radio, you have no communication except the guard who comes by with some food occasionally. And so that was kind of difficult, and it was very, very difficult to try to remain positive and think positively, because everything that you could think about was not good. And then after 7 days, they take me out of solitary and they put me in a bigger cell with 7 guys, and 2 of them were my crew members. And now I need to back up just a second. When they put me on the truck, when they transported me from out wherever I was to Hanoi and put me on the back, in the back of this truck, I could see there were 4 other guys in the back, and they were all my guys. So I knew 5 of the 6 of us had survived. And the only one missing was my EW, Bill Conley. And I thought 5 out of 6 isn't bad. Well, when they put me in there, guess who's there? Bill Conley. So I had at least something to feel good about when I saw Bill, and knew that the entire crew had at least survived the shoot down and the bailout. So I introduced myself to the other guys in the room, and then I said, I need to talk to these 2. So what I told them was, I said, guys, worst decision I ever made in my life. Never should have bailed out. We should have taken our chances on making it to the Gulf. And my NAV, Billy Nail, I think he'd only been out of Mather, out of NAV school for 3 or 4 months. I mean, he was new. And he was terrified of me, and I'm one of the nicest guys you ever want to meet. And he always called me by my first name, sir. And while I'm telling these guys, damn, worst decision I ever made. He's laying on the floor. He took a lot of shrapnel. We were really worried about whether he was going to make it or not. But he's laying on the floor, and he's got this little smile on his face while I'm saying this to he and Conley. And I thought, what the hell is it with him? What's this smiling when I'm telling him this? And then he says, well, sir, I'm sure glad you made that decision down here and not up there. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, my ejection seat didn't work. I had to manually bail out. And so, then he told me, he said, and I saw the airplane fireball when I was out of the airplane, and the gunner did too. So that made me feel a little bit better about my decision. But you know what, guys? To this day, I still wonder. I still wonder if we could have made it. And of course, I'll never know the answer to that. Tom will be able to tell you a lot of stories about being a real POW. I just have a couple of things that happened to me in my 3.5 months that I want to share with you. And one of them was the last night that I was in the Hilton. It was around the 26th, 27th. It was just before they told us about the ceasefire being signed. And we were enjoying our cabbage soup. That was our main fare. And we called it cabbage soup because it was the only thing that we could ID in the soup was cabbage. And we had no clue what the rest of the stuff was. So it was cabbage soup. But we got really excited this particular night because in it were chunks of potato. And you would think those were filet mignons the way we were acting. Wow, we got chunks of potato. And this young co-pilot, Paul Granger, said, he said, hey, he said, there's something in this potato, half the size of this paper, folded up very smallly. And Paul reads it and says, welcome to the Hilton. We'll get the plums to you ASAP. Plums. They got plums? We're going to get food? I didn't find out until I came home from one of the old heads that the plums were their operating. That's the rules they created as POWs that they were going to live by. And that's what they said they were going to get to us, so we would know what the rules of engagement were for us as POWs in that environment. And then the other thing on the message was scratch an R under the handle if you receive this. So we did, and before daylight the next morning, they loaded us up on buses and trucks us off to the another camp on the south side of Hanoi, which we call the zoo. And the other event that I'd like to share with you, I was talking to somebody about it earlier here today, and this is one of my interrogations. And the typical interrogation, the guard would come to the cell, get you, take you to the interrogation room, and you go in and there was a stool and a desk. And the guard would put you on the stool facing the desk, and he would leave, and the interrogator would come in and sit at the desk. That was it. Well, this particular day, when the guard comes and gets me for an interrogation, he opens the door, and I knew right away this is not going to be a regular interrogation because there are a lot of people in this room, and there are a lot of TV cameras, and there are lights, and there are, I thought, this is not good. This is not good. As it turns out, their lead MiG pilot was going to do the interrogation. And I remember one of the early questions he asked me was, why can we fly off your wing and you do nothing? And to myself, I said, probably because we don't know you're out there on our wing. And to him, I said, we weren't worried about you guys. We were worried about the SAMs. We didn't care about MiGs. And he asked a few other questions, and then he asked the one that I'd been hoping he would ask something like that. Because this was my opportunity, and it took us through most of the rest of the interrogation. He said, you will tell me about the heat deflectors on the B-52 engines. So for the next, however long that interrogation went, I gave them all kinds of details on the heat deflectors on the B-52. There are even some drawings somewhere probably up in the door. And I can tell from the reaction that there are no heat deflectors on the B-52 engines. So I wanted to share that with you. Let's talk a minute about something that's near and dear to all of our hearts, air power. And I'm sure most of you have heard what I've heard through the years. You cannot achieve an objective or goal strictly through air power. You have to have boots on the ground. Really? How about Linebacker II? There weren't any boots on the ground. That was strictly an air operation. The objective and goal was twofold. Get us out of this war in Vietnam and bring our POWs home. And how many years have they been trying to do that? And we did it in 11 days. I mean, it was just 30 days after we stopped bombing that the ceasefire was signed. 2 weeks after that, the first group of POWs were released. So, hey, air power. All right. Now, I'm with Lou Gehrig. Name ring a bell with anyone?
Yeah.
Lou Gehrig, New York Yankees, played with Babe Ruth. And when he was told that he had a disease that they knew very little about, and when they told him, they also told him you've only got 2 or 3 months to live. And at his retirement ceremony at Yankee Stadium, he made a comment that has become world famous. When he said, I consider myself the luckiest man alive. I'm with Lou. You think about it, I've been down some roads, but let's go back to Linebacker II. 10 B-52s were shot down in the immediate Hanoi area in a period of 8 days. 5 others were badly damaged but managed to make it back to Thailand. But of those 10, 6 people on an airplane had 60 crew members, 31 of us survived. 50% loss rate on crew members. I could just as easily been in that other 50%. And of the 10, only 1 where the entire crew survived, and that was mine. So I'm with Lou Gehrig. I consider myself one of the luckiest men alive. Thank you. Yeah, they were all coming in, well, this shouldn't be too hard. And so, yeah, the tactics were terrible because they were using tactics that worked against single SAM not against mobile SAM sites. And just a little aside on that, I heard that of the 15 B-52s that were hit by SAMs, I think it was like 10 or 11 of them, this team was able to determine 10 or 11 of them were all hit by one of those 12 or 13 SAM rings. And I remember when I was in charm school, and we had a traveling road show come through, and they were talking Linebacker II, and they were briefing that, and so they were talking about the statistics and everything else, how many airplanes and everything. And they mentioned that, about that one SAM ring. So afterwards I talked to the guy and I said, can you tell me if I was one of those that was shot down by that super SAM ring? And he said, if you know your call sign and the date you were shot down. I said, just happen to know that. And so he said, yeah, you were one of those. So I asked my EW, I said, what do you think? And he said, I think they may have been Russians operating that SAM ring. And when I asked the team chief, he would not answer the question. So this is just a guess on my part, but for some reason or other, that one SAM ring was certainly outdoing the other SAM rings. So yeah, the tactics weren't too great. Anything else? Yes?
Did the bombs go down with your airplane? Or did you jettison?
That was one of the first questions I asked my bombardier RN. And the first time I got a chance to talk to him was, we got to the Hilton late in the evening, and there was a real nasty interrogation that took place initially. And then they threw me in this little pickup, what I call pickup, and I noticed another guy laying on the floor next to me, and it was my RN, Lou Bernasconi. And I asked him the question you asked. I said, Lou, were you able to hear the bombs? And he said, yes, I did. The ear being emergency arm release. And he released them between the two SAMs hitting the airplane, evidently. So they didn't, the bombs didn't go down into the airplane.
Yes. John, why don't you tell them about that first night after you were captured, when the strikes were still continuing, and like you mentioned, EAR isn't necessarily as accurate as when you're steering with the steering handle and the radar is tracking on the target. Well, tell them what you thought about, geez, I survived the bailout.
Oh, yeah.
What's going to happen?
Oh, what he's talking about is the big night was the night of the 26th of December, because, you know, we wouldn't do anything on Christmas Day, so we stood down. But that worked well for both us and the V. It worked well for us because they could do some really necessary maintenance on some of the buffs. And the way it helped the V was they were able to restock with their SAMs. So the night of the 26th was really a big show. And that was the night I was telling someone about it, that somebody put a string of bombs in just a few blocks from the Hilton. And I was in solitary then, and the shutters over the bars on the window, wooden shutters, were banging back and forth like they were made out of cardboard. Plaster was coming down off the ceiling, and I thought, this is about as ironic as it gets. 3 nights ago, I was the bombee, now I'm the bomber, now I'm the bombee, and I survived the shoot down, I survived being captured, and this is the way I'm going to check out. Is getting killed by my buddies, putting these bombs in this close to the Hilton. So yeah, that was quite an experience. Anything else? Okay.